Hello and good evening. Welcome to another episode of Between the Presets, a podcast by me, Rudy Stettner, that comes out every Monday evening. Here is the place where anything that can be said in polite company is fair game for discussion, even if it occasionally offends. Let's roll. Please be advised that this episode of Between the Presets contains material that may be unsuitable for younger audiences. If that is an issue, please listen at another time or on headphones. Thank you. Hello, it is Monday evening, the 5th of Sivan, 5784, that being June 10th, 2024. After 7 weeks of long preparation, starting from the second day of Passover, we are now entering into the Festival of Shavuot. Literally translates as the Feast of Week, Shavuot, week, weeks, in which we celebrate the giving of the law. We read the 10 Commandments in synagogue, and this defines us as a people, as a nation. One analogy, one metaphor that always comes back to me is that of the spoken and written language. We have rules of grammar. We have a menu of sounds from which our language is drawn. And by submitting ourselves to the yoke of the rules of the language we speak, be it English, French, Hebrew, whatever, it gives us a freedom. It enables us to think. It enables us to achieve things as human beings that would be utterly beyond our reach if we did not abide by those rules. For me, the English language is fairly new in our family. None of my four grandparents were born speaking it. They spoke either Hungarian, German, or Croatian, and adopted English when they came to the United States of America. And if I feel gratitude for the laws and traditions of the English language that enable me to express myself, communicate, and even think, how much more so do I feel a gratitude to the Almighty for giving us the law, giving us the Torah, which enables us to live, to think, and to experience life as we do. Now, in a slight change of topic, I had a familial connection to the experience in communist East Germany of being subjugated to communism. No matter how crazy and left-wing foolish I was in my younger days, the idea of putting an entire country under lockdown, prohibiting people from coming and going if they pleased, just offended the sense in which I was raised. If you're building a utopia, the idea is to make it into a place where people would naturally want to stay and live there. So I had kind of a morbid, fascination with, the Berlin Wall, the wall around communist countries, how were people kept into this giant prison. And one of the things I was told about East German border guards, and I would be amazed if this were not true of, say, North Korean border guards today, is that when they were working a guard tower, they would be put up there or put on their stretch of the border in pairs. And not only would they be watching the border for signs of human beings fleeing, they would also be watching each other. They never quite got to thoroughly trust each other. Each wondered whatever intentions they harbored in their heart. Each wondered if the other one was not a snitch. And just to make sure that no subversive friendships developed on the border, there were regular rotations. So if a couple of border guards got to be friendly with each other, one day they would find that they were rotated to another location or put with somebody new. And they could never quite be sure of if the other person wouldn't turn them in if they had any desire to themselves escape or to turn a blind eye to someone else trying to escape, communist East Germany. Now, one of the things that the communists did in the Russian Revolution of 1917 was they waged a complete attack on family life. They wanted to liberate the people from bourgeois marriage. They actively promoted so-called free love. They promoted basically transient relationships where it was just a series of, one-night stands, undocumented relationships, what have you. And back then in that time, it was a lot about what the men wanted, what the men considered freedom, with far less thought given to what the women wanted. All of this was going on as the dictatorial power of the communists was being consolidated, and the communist stranglehold over what had been the Russian Empire and became the Soviet Union was underway. It took place in the horrific turmoil of the Russian Civil War, which lasted from 1918 to 1921. It was an unmitigated disaster. There was a predictable epidemics of various venereal diseases. There was out-of-wedlock pregnancies. There was waves of homeless children created by this disastrous social experiment. And eventually, it was under Stalin, Joseph Stalin, by about 1928, that they realized that, or implemented the realization that when consolidating the power of the communist regime, that this free love affair was not useful. Quite a few of the orphans of this disastrous experiment ended up being killed. They were an inconvenience to the regime. They were an afterthought. What did remain in the Soviet outlook was a disrespect for marriage. It was very easy. They had their version of no-fault divorce, of easy divorce. When husbands and wives worked, it was very difficult for them to get vacations at the same time, difficult for husbands and wives, and difficult for children as well. They did have the communist youth groups, which had camps, sometimes sleepaway camps. All of this was calculated. Just like with border guards, if they can't quite trust each other, they're not going to plan an escape together. If you have transient relationships or superficial marriages in which husbands and wives or boyfriends and girlfriends can never quite trust each other, passing on subversive ideas is that much more difficult. When you have the communist youth, the young pioneers, or the Hitler youth, Bund Deutsche Mädel, League of German Girls, when you have them taking over every minute of spare time that children have, it interferes with the bonding of the family. It interferes with the value transmission that goes on naturally in happy families. Among the Christian majority in Russia, Christianity had a strong hold, and there was also the desire and attempt to pass on Jewish inhabitants of the Soviet Union to pass on their traditions as well. And everything that was done was an attempt to disrupt this stream of values transmission. And like the French Revolution back in the late 1700s, they even attempted to interfere with the calendar, to do away with the 7-day week, and to make it impossible to keep track of what the seventh day might be it the Jewish Sabbath or Christian Sunday or whatever. Thankfully, during both the French Revolution and the Bolshevik Revolution 2 centuries later, or about 120 years later, 1791, 1891, about 130 years later, this attempt at overthrowing the calendar by which people conducted their lives turned out to be a blessed failure. To a majority of citizens in this country, political freedom, the freedom to assemble around shared political beliefs about how society should be run, and religious freedom are extremely important values. Thoughtful couples who are starting a family want to find somebody with whom they can find agreement on what religious values they want to pass on. In many families, the passion people feel about their political affiliation, either Democrat, Republican, whether they're libertarian or socialist, I think people nowadays are frequently more impassioned about their political affiliations and beliefs than they are about their religious beliefs. And it's very, very important to find someone to build a home with who shares enough of one's values that one can move forward together. But going back to the guard towers on the East German border and the campaign of promiscuity in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution, there seems to be an inverse correlation between political freedom and sexual licentiousness, unbridled sexual freedom. If you can get people to live like a pack of gerbils that have no serious loyalty to each other, then they can be manipulated. You don't have to worry about a kid coming home from school and being quietly told by his parents that we believe a little bit differently than that what you're being taught in the communist youth or the Hitler youth is not what we believe. There is, in short, a system of checks and balances in any properly operating society. We commonly hear in civics classes about the checks and balances between the executive branch headed by the president, the legislative branch headed by, in the United States, the Senate and the House of Representatives, and the judicial branch headed by the, system of courts that run in this country. The family and also the religious denominations, the faith communities, constitute two additional, hopefully independent parts of a healthy functioning system of checks and balances. Also a healthy functioning economy is important. People associating to produce goods and services, an exchange in which the needs of the worker are met in exchange for his providing within an economic framework something of good for the society. And just as it's extremely important to have an independent judiciary that administers the law as it's intended to be administered with fairness and justice to everyone, it's important that the religious denominations likewise remain independent of the control of the state or of a political faction within a country. It's safe to say in this country that if one is a left-wing political activist committing crimes in the name of one's belief, rioting or whatever, that one is treated far differently from a January 6th protester. That if one's last name is Biden, one is treated very, very differently by law enforcement than if its last name is Trump. It's troubling that the citizen observers of these legal processes often watch them with partisan considerations in mind. In China, and that's one party system that is alive and well today, one also has puppet religious denominations. There are official Christian churches approved by the communist regime, and there are underground churches which one joins at one's own peril. The same restrictions apply to non-Christian religious denominations as well. People such as the Falun Gong run the serious risk of being imprisoned and used as fodder for organ transplants, a human chop, as it were. So in concluding, I want to wish all of my listeners a blessed and happy week moving forward. As I celebrate the holiday of Shavuot, I am contemplating the freedom and well-being that comes from submitting oneself to the yoke of divine law, and I wish that for the country, that our various branches of government should function well and harmoniously, that our families should be strong and our faith communities should be independent, and that our economic system should produce well for its participants and be conducted in a spirit of harmony. To me, the whole idea of class struggle is an anathema. The idea of there being a potential state of harmony between the different sectors of society is a vision that I find most captivating. May we all, with the help of the Almighty, live well and prosper. Thank you. This wraps up another weekly episode of Between the Presets. I thank you all for the pleasure of sharing with me my weekly muse. Whatever platform you access, hitting like, subscribe, or leaving a comment is much appreciated. My email address is thewinterriders@gmail.com. thewinterriders@gmail.com. Until next week, adio, which in some African languages means born on Monday or be righteous, and closely resembles adios in Spanish.